The city never truly sleeps, but it does exhale. In those hours before dawn, when the streetlights still glow against a sky turning from black to deep purple, there's a particular kind of quiet that settles over everything. That's when Miguel Santos begins his shift. He's been a cleaner at the Central District Transit Hub for 11 years now, long enough that he knows the building's rhythms better than his own heartbeat. The squeak of the third wheel on his cleaning cart, the way the fluorescent lights in the east wing hum slightly off-key, the exact temperature of the coffee from the vending machine on the second floor at 4:45 in the morning. Miguel arrives each day at 4:30, parks his old sedan in the employee lot, and enters through the service entrance with his ID badge and a thermos of coffee his wife Maria prepares the night before. He's 52, with gray threading through his black hair and deep lines around his eyes that come from decades of early mornings and late nights. His hands are calloused, his back sometimes aches, but he takes pride in his work. When passengers rush through the terminal at 7 in the morning, they don't notice the gleaming floors or the emptied trash bins or the spotless windows. But Miguel notices. That's enough for him. It was a Tuesday in late September when he first saw the dog. The animal was sitting near the north entrance, just outside the automatic doors, positioned in that precise spot where the building's overhang provides shelter from rain, but still allows a view of the street. A medium-sized dog, maybe some kind of shepherd mix with a tan and gray coat that had seen better days. The dog wasn't begging or wandering aimlessly like most strays. It was simply sitting, perfectly still, watching the empty street with an intensity that struck Miguel as almost human. Miguel had paused with his cleaning cart, studying the animal through the glass doors. The dog's posture suggested waiting, not wandering. Its ears were perked forward, alert. Every few minutes, it would turn its head slowly, scanning the sidewalk in both directions, then return to its fixed gaze down the street toward the city's older neighborhoods. When a bus pulled up to the nearby stop and passengers disembarked, the dog's whole body tensed, leaning forward slightly. But as the passengers dispersed and no one approached, the animal settled back into its vigil. Miguel watched for perhaps 5 minutes before continuing his rounds. He had work to do, and stray dogs were common enough in the city. By the time he finished cleaning the main terminal floor and moved to the upper-level offices, he'd nearly forgotten about it. But the next morning, the dog was there again. Same spot, same posture, same unwavering attention directed down the street, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. By the end of the first week, Miguel found himself looking for the dog as soon as he arrived. It became part of his routine, something he checked on like the coffee temperature or the supply of cleaning solution in the storage room. The animal never tried to enter the building, never approached the few passengers who arrived for early morning buses, never begged for food. It simply waited. On the 8th day, Miguel brought a small plastic container with leftover chicken from dinner. He approached the doors cautiously, not wanting to startle the animal. When the automatic doors whooshed open, the dog's head swiveled toward him, ears flattening slightly. Miguel could see the wariness in its brown eyes, the tension in its shoulders ready to bolt. He set the container down about 10 feet away, then backed up slowly. "It's okay," he said softly in Portuguese, though he knew the dog wouldn't understand the words. "Just some food. You look hungry." The dog didn't move toward the food while Miguel stood there. It watched him, calculating, deciding. Miguel retreated back into the terminal and observed through the glass. Several minutes passed. Then, with quick, nervous movements, the dog approached the container, sniffed it thoroughly, and began to eat. The way it ate told Miguel everything he needed to know about how long it had been since the animal had a proper meal. Not the desperate, aggressive eating of a starving creature, but the careful, almost dignified consumption of someone trying to maintain composure despite genuine hunger. That became part of the routine, too. Miguel would arrive at 4:30, and sometime during his first hour of work, he'd bring out whatever leftover meat or rice Maria had packed for him. The dog learned to expect it. Over the following weeks, the distance between them gradually shortened. 10 feet became 8, then 6, then 4. By mid-October, Miguel could set the food down just a few steps from the dog, close enough to see the worn leather collar around its neck, the way its ribs showed slightly through its coat, the small scar above its left eye. "Where do you come from?" Miguel asked one morning, crouching down as the dog ate. "Who are you waiting for?" The dog paused its eating to glance at him, then returned to the food. There was something profoundly sad in its eyes, Miguel thought. Not the blank sadness of an abandoned animal, but something more specific, more personal. Other people noticed too. Beatriz, who ran the small coffee kiosk in the terminal and arrived around 5:30 each morning, had commented on it. "That dog's been out there for weeks now," she said, as Miguel ordered his morning coffee. "Same spot every single day. Never moves except to eat what you bring it. It's strange, don't you think?" "Maybe it's waiting for someone," Miguel said. Beatriz frowned. "For a month? What kind of person makes a dog wait that long?" Miguel didn't have an answer. He'd been wondering the same thing. At night, lying in bed next to Maria, he'd mentioned the dog. "There's something different about this one," he told her. "It's not just surviving, it's hoping." Maria, practical as always, had suggested he call animal control. If it's a stray, they should take it to a shelter. Someone might adopt it. But Miguel couldn't bring himself to make that call. The dog wasn't causing problems. It wasn't aggressive or disruptive. And something about its vigil felt sacred somehow, like Miguel would be violating something important if he interfered. As October turned to November and the mornings grew colder, Miguel began bringing an old blanket from home. He'd leave it folded near where the dog sat. The first few days, the dog ignored it. Then one morning, Miguel arrived to find the animal lying on the blanket, curled into a tight ball against the chill. The sight had made something in his chest tighten. The dog was cleaner now, its coat healthier from regular feeding. Miguel had started bringing better food, things he'd specifically buy at the market on his way home from work. Cooked chicken breast, lean ground beef, once a small piece of grilled fish that the dog had devoured with what looked almost like joy. They had developed an understanding, Miguel and the dog. Not quite friendship, perhaps, but something close. The dog no longer flinched when Miguel approached. It would look up at him, tail offering a small, tentative wag. Sometimes, if Miguel sat down nearby during his break, the dog would inch closer, until they were separated by just a foot or two. "You're getting attached," Beatriz observed one morning in late November. Miguel shrugged. "Someone has to care. But it's not your dog." "I know," Miguel said. "It's someone else's. That's the problem." On a Wednesday morning in early December, Miguel arrived to find the weather had turned harsh overnight. A cold rain was falling, the kind that soaks through clothes and chills to the bone. The dog was in its usual spot, but it was shivering, its coat plastered to its body. The blanket Miguel had provided was soaked through. Miguel felt anger flash through him, anger at whoever had left this animal, whoever it was waiting for, whoever had broken the implicit promise between human and dog. He went inside, found a large piece of cardboard from the recycling, and constructed a makeshift shelter against the wall, positioning it so the dog could still see the street but would be protected from the rain. Then he brought out a dry towel from the maintenance closet. "Come here," he said, his voice firmer than usual. "You can't stay wet like that." The dog looked at him, then at the improved shelter. For the first time since Miguel had been feeding it, the animal stood and moved, positioning itself under the cardboard and settling onto the dry towel. Miguel crouched down nearby, close enough now that he could have reached out and touched the dog if he'd wanted to. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked again, softer now. "Why haven't they come?" The dog's eyes met his, and in that moment Miguel made a decision. Tomorrow he would try to read the collar. He'd gotten close enough before to see it was old leather with some kind of metal tag attached, but he'd never been able to make out what it said. If there was a name, a phone number, maybe he could find whoever owned this animal. Maybe he could give them both peace. The next morning, Miguel brought extra food and a new blanket. He also brought something else, a small flashlight in case he needed help reading whatever was on that collar. The dog was in its spot, dry now under the shelter Miguel had improved the night before with a piece of actual tarp from the maintenance supplies. Miguel sat down about 3 feet away, closer than he'd ever been. The dog watched him but didn't retreat. They'd moved past that. Miguel set down the food and waited while the animal ate. When it finished, he spoke softly. "I need to see your collar. I need to know who you belong to. Will you let me?" The dog sat there, rain pattering on the tarp above them, the city beginning to wake up around them. Miguel slowly extended his hand, palm up, letting the dog sniff it. The animal's nose was cold and wet against his skin. Then, moving with the kind of careful slowness he might use with a frightened child, Miguel reached toward the dog's neck. The dog tensed but didn't pull away. Miguel's fingers found the collar, felt the worn leather, the coolness of the metal tag. He angled it slightly, trying to catch the light from the street lamp. The tag was old, scratched, some of the engraving nearly worn away. But he could make out letters. He clicked on his flashlight, directing the beam carefully. What he read made his breath catch in his throat. The tag had a name engraved on it. Feel. Faithful in Portuguese. Below that, an address. Rua das Acacias, 247, Apt 3B. And then in smaller letters that were harder to read, worn nearly smooth. "If found, please don't take him away. He's waiting for me. Roberto Silva." But there was more. Attached to the collar with what looked like electrical tape, protected by a small plastic bag, was a folded piece of paper. Miguel's hands trembled slightly as he carefully removed it. The dog remained still, as if understanding the importance of this moment. Miguel unfolded the paper. It was a note, handwritten in shaky letters, the ink slightly smudged in places where moisture had seeped through despite the plastic protection. "To whoever finds my dog. His name is Feel. He is waiting for me at the bus stop on Avenida Central in front of the transit hub. I took that bus every morning at 5:15 to get to work at the textile factory. I would get off at 6:45. Feel walked me to the bus stop every morning and waited for me every evening. He never missed a day in 3 years. On October 18th, I had a stroke on the bus. They took me to Hospital São Lucas. I have been here for 6 weeks. The doctors say I will not walk again. My daughter lives in another city and cannot take care of Feel. She wanted to take him to the pound, but I could not bear it. I told her to let him go, to let him wait. Maybe he will understand eventually that I am not coming back. Or maybe he will find someone kind. He is a good dog. The best dog. He does not deserve to be locked in a cage, confused and afraid. If you are reading this, it means you have been kind to him. Thank you. If you can, please take care of him. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I love him. Tell him he is a good boy. Roberto Silva, November 24th. Miguel read the note 3 times, each word hitting him with the force of a physical blow. His eyes burned, and he had to blink rapidly several times. The dog, Feel, sat beside him, still watching the street, still waiting for the man who would never arrive at 6:45. The mathematics of it were devastating. October 18th. Today was December 5th. That meant Feel had been waiting for 49 days. 49 mornings of watching for his person. 49 evenings of waiting for a familiar step, a familiar smell, a familiar voice that would never come. Miguel looked at the address on the tag. Rua das Acacias was in the Jardim Esperança neighborhood, maybe a 20-minute drive from here. He looked at the note again. Hospital São Lucas was across the city, perhaps 30 minutes in the opposite direction. And Roberto Silva, the man who had loved this dog enough to set it free rather than see it caged, was lying in a hospital bed, probably wondering if Feel had given up, moved on, found someone else. Or maybe Roberto was wondering if Feel was dead, if choosing freedom had been the wrong call, if his daughter had been right to suggest the pound. Miguel sat there in the cold December morning, rain falling around them, and made another decision. He pulled out his phone and found the number for Hospital São Lucas. When the operator answered, he asked to be connected to patient information. "I'm looking for information about a patient named Roberto Silva," Miguel said. "He would have been admitted around October 18th. There was typing on the other end. "I have a Roberto Silva admitted on October 18th. Are you family?" "No," Miguel said. I'm I found his dog. A pause. I can't give out patient information to non-family members. Can you at least tell me if he's still there? If he's alive? Another pause. He's still a patient here. That's all I can say. Can I visit? I need to tell him something about his dog. Visiting hours are from 10 to 8. But again, if you're not family. Thank you, Miguel said, ending the call. He looked at Phil, who was looking back at him now with those intelligent, sorrowful eyes. Your person is alive, Miguel told the dog. He's alive and he misses you, and he thinks about you every day. Phil's tail moved slightly, the smallest acknowledgement. Miguel knew what he had to do, but it wasn't simple. His shift at the transit hub ended at 1 in the afternoon. He could drive to the hospital after work, but he'd need to bring Phil with him. And hospitals didn't allow dogs, even dogs with heartbreaking stories. But maybe if he talked to the right person, explained the situation, showed them the note. He carefully returned the note to its plastic protection and taped it back to the collar. Then, for the first time, he reached out and gently stroked Phil's head. The dog leaned into the touch, just slightly, and Miguel felt his chest tighten again. I'm going to help you, he said, I promise. The rest of Miguel's shift passed in a blur. He cleaned mechanically, his mind working through the logistics of what he needed to do. When Beatrice commented that he seemed distracted, he showed her the note. She read it with her hand over her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. You have to take the dog to him, she said. You have to find a way. I know, Miguel said. I'm going to try. At 1 o'clock, Miguel clocked out and walked to his car. Phil was in his usual spot, alert now because this wasn't the time Miguel usually approached. Miguel had brought his old jacket from the back seat. He crouched down next to the dog. Phil, he said, using the dog's name for the first time. We're going for a ride. I think I can take you to Roberto. The name. Something flickered in Phil's eyes when Miguel said Roberto's name. Recognition, longing, hope. Come, Miguel said gently, patting his leg. Come, Phil. The dog stood. For a moment it looked back at the street, toward where the bus would come at 6:45. Then it looked at Miguel. And then, in an act of trust that Miguel knew he would remember for the rest of his life, Phil followed him to the car. The drive to Rua das Acacias took 18 minutes. Miguel wasn't entirely sure why he was going there first, but something told him he needed to see where Roberto and Phil had lived. He needed to understand the full story before he could figure out how to bring it to the right ending. Apartment 3B was in an older building, the kind built in the 70s with narrow balconies and faded paint. Miguel parked on the street and looked up at the windows. Phil was on the seat next to him, pressed against the passenger door, trembling slightly. Not from fear, Miguel thought, but from a different kind of intensity. This place smelled like home. Miguel left Phil in the car and walked to the building entrance. There was no doorman, just a set of buzzers. He found 3B and pressed it. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. An elderly woman emerged from the building, shopping bag in hand. Miguel held the door for her. Excuse me, he said. Do you know Roberto Silva, from apartment 3B? The woman's face fell. Poor Roberto. He had a stroke, you know, on the bus to work. His daughter came and emptied the apartment. She lives in São Paulo. Said she couldn't keep coming back here. The landlord is looking for a new tenant. She paused, studying Miguel. Why are you asking? I found his dog, Miguel said, the one that used to walk him to the bus stop. The woman's hand flew to her chest. Phil? You found Phil? That sweet boy. Roberto loved that dog more than anything. When his wife died 5 years ago, that dog was all he had. They were inseparable. She shook her head. The daughter wanted to take Phil to the pound. I heard them arguing about it in the hallway. Roberto was so upset, even with his speech all slurred from the stroke. He kept saying, no, no, let him go. Better free than caged. The daughter thought he was being cruel, but I understood. Roberto was trying to give Phil a chance at a new life. Better than wasting away in a cage waiting for someone who would never come. She looked past Miguel toward his car. Is he in there? Is Phil in your car? Yes, Miguel said. Can I see him? They walked to the car together. When the woman saw Phil through the window, she made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He looks thin, but he's alive. He's alive. I've been feeding him, Miguel said. He's been waiting at the bus stop every morning. Same spot, same time. The woman wiped her eyes. Of course he has. That's what faithful means, doesn't it? That's why Roberto named him that. She looked at Miguel. What are you going to do? I'm going to take him to the hospital, Miguel said. I'm going to find a way to let Roberto see him, even if just once, so they can both know the other is okay. The woman nodded. Roberto is at San Lucas, right? My son works there. He's an orderly. Let me call him. Maybe he can help. 10 minutes later, Miguel had the name and direct number of Jose Ferreira, an orderly at Hospital San Lucas who worked the afternoon shift. When Miguel called and explained the situation, Jose was quiet for a long moment. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week, Jose finally said. And I work in a hospital, so that's saying something. Look, I can't promise anything, but if you can get here around 4:30 right before the shift change, and if the dog is well behaved and if Roberto is having a good day, maybe we can figure something out. There's a garden area on the ground floor. It's technically hospital property, but it's outdoors. If I could wheel Roberto out there and you happen to be walking by with a dog. I'll be there, Miguel said. 4:30, thank you. Miguel had 3 hours. He drove to a pet supply store and bought a proper leash, some dog shampoo, and a brush. Then he drove to a self-service dog wash station he'd seen near his neighborhood. Phil tolerated the bath with surprising patience, as if understanding that this was important. Miguel worked gently, washing away weeks of dirt and street grime, revealing the beautiful tan and gray coat underneath. When they were done, Phil looked like a different dog, still too thin but clean, dignified, ready to see his person. Miguel drove to Hospital San Lucas and parked in the visitor lot. It was 4:25. His heart was pounding harder than it had in years. He called Jose's number. We're here, he said. Good timing, Jose said. I just checked on Roberto. He's awake and lucid today. I'm going to tell him we need to take him to physical therapy, then I'll wheel him to the garden. Give me 5 minutes, then bring the dog around to the east side of the building. There's a bench near some rose bushes. I'll have Roberto positioned so he can see it. Miguel waited, watching the clock on his phone. Phil was alert in the passenger seat, sensing something important was happening. When 5 minutes had passed, Miguel clipped on the new leash and opened the door. Come on, Phil, he said. Let's go see Roberto. They walked around the east side of the building, Miguel's heart hammering. He could see the garden area now, well maintained with paved paths and flowering bushes. And there, in a wheelchair near a bed of roses, was an elderly man, thin and frail-looking, with a blanket over his lap. Jose stood behind the wheelchair, and when he saw Miguel, he gave a small nod. Miguel stopped about 30 feet away, partially hidden by a larger bush. He needed to see what would happen, needed to see if this was right. Phil saw Roberto before Miguel could decide what to do next. The dog's entire body went rigid, every muscle tensed. A low whine escaped its throat, so full of longing and recognition that Miguel felt tears spring to his eyes. Phil pulled at the leash, not aggressively, but with intense purpose. Go ahead, Miguel said softly, unclipping the leash. Go see him. Phil didn't run. The dog walked forward, slowly at first, then faster, as if afraid this might be a dream that would dissolve if approached too quickly. Roberto hadn't seen them yet. He was looking at the roses, his face slack on one side from the stroke, his hands trembling slightly. Then Jose leaned down and said something, pointing. Roberto's head turned, and his eyes, the one that still moved properly, went wide. Feel? The word came out slurred, thick, broken by damaged neural pathways but unmistakable. Phil was running now, closing the distance, and when the dog reached the wheelchair, it didn't jump up or knock into Roberto. Instead, with a gentleness that spoke to years of understanding, Phil placed its head in Roberto's lap and let out a sound Miguel had never heard from the dog before. A cry of pure, unfiltered emotion. Roberto's working hand came down to rest on Phil's head. His face crumpled and tears streamed down his cheeks. "Phil," he said again, and then words Miguel couldn't make out, words broken by stroke and emotion and relief. Jose had tears on his face too, and he looked over at Miguel and mouthed, "Thank you." Miguel watched from his position by the bush, his own tears flowing freely now. He watched as Roberto stroked Phil's head with his shaking hand, as Phil pressed closer, as 38 days of waiting dissolved in one perfect moment of reunion. He watched as Jose quietly took out his phone and captured a photo. He watched as two beings who loved each other were allowed, through the kindness of strangers and the small rebellions of hospital orderlies, to be together one more time. After about 10 minutes, Jose caught Miguel's eye and gestured slightly toward the building. Shift change was over. They were running out of time. Miguel nodded and slowly approached the wheelchair. Roberto looked up at him, his face still wet with tears. "You," he said simply. "You brought him." "I found your note," Miguel said, "on his collar." Roberto's working hand moved from Phil's head to grip Miguel's hand with surprising strength. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you." "He waited every day," Miguel said. "Same spot, same time. He never gave up on you." Roberto nodded, more tears falling. He looked down at Phil. "Good boy," he said, the words thick but clear enough. "Best boy." Jose stepped forward gently. "Roberto, I need to take you back inside, but I have an idea, if you're okay with it." Roberto looked up at him. "The man who found Phil," Jose said, gesturing to Miguel. "He's been taking care of him, feeding him, making sure he's safe. What if he kept taking care of Phil for you? Not forever. Just until you can figure out a better plan, or..." He paused. "Or maybe it is forever. Maybe Phil has a new person, but one who will let you see him. One who will bring him to visit." Roberto looked at Miguel, a question in his eyes. "I'll take care of him," Miguel said without hesitation. "I promise. And I'll bring him to visit as often as the hospital allows. And when you get out, we'll figure something out. Maybe Phil can have two homes, or maybe..." He paused. "Maybe we can work something out." Roberto held Miguel's gaze for a long moment. Then he looked down at Phil, at the dog who had waited 38 days and would have waited 380 days if necessary. He stroked Phil's head one more time, then nodded at Miguel. "You take him," Roberto said. "Keep him safe." "I will," Miguel said. Jose wheeled Roberto back toward the building. Phil took several steps to follow, whining. Roberto looked back, raising his working hand in a small wave. "Stay," he said to Phil. "Stay. With him. Good boy." Phil stopped, torn between two impossibilities. Then Miguel crouched down next to the dog, one hand on his collar. "It's okay," Miguel said. "We'll come back, I promise. We'll come back." Phil watched until Roberto disappeared inside. Then the dog looked up at Miguel, and in that look was acceptance and trust and the beginning of something new. The drive home took longer than expected because of traffic. Phil sat in the passenger seat, pressed against the window, occasionally looking at Miguel as if to confirm he was still there. When they pulled up to Miguel's small house on the outskirts of the city, Maria was in the garden, watering her vegetables. She looked up at the sound of the car and her eyes widened when she saw the dog. Miguel got out and opened the passenger door. Phil followed him, staying close. Maria walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "This is Phil," Miguel said. "He's going to be staying with us." Maria looked at the dog, then at her husband. "Is this the one from the transit hub? The one you've been feeding?" "Yes," Miguel said. "But it's not that simple." He told her everything, the note, the hospital, Roberto, the reunion. By the end, Maria was crying and she crouched down to let Phil sniff her hand. "Of course he can stay," she said. "Of course." That night, Phil slept on the floor next to Miguel and Maria's bed, on a pile of old blankets Maria had arranged. But around 3 in the morning, Miguel woke to find Fiel sitting by the door, staring at it intently. Miguel got up and walked over. "What is it?" he asked softly. Then he understood. "You want to go to the bus stop? You want to wait?" Fiel looked up at him. Miguel thought about it, thought about the note, about Roberto saying let him wait, because he understood that sometimes love means waiting, even when waiting seems pointless to everyone else. But he also thought about Roberto saying stay with him, about giving Miguel the responsibility of caring for this dog, of helping Fiel understand that waiting wasn't necessary anymore. "Not tonight," Miguel said gently. "Roberto doesn't want you to wait anymore. He wants you to live." But he paused, an idea forming. "Tomorrow morning I'll take you to work with me. You can see the bus stop, see that Roberto isn't there, and then we'll go home. We'll do that for a while until you understand. Okay?" Fiel seemed to consider this, then returned to the blankets and lay down. And that's what they did. Every morning for the next 2 weeks, Miguel brought Fiel to the transit hub. They would stand near the old spot for a few minutes. Fiel would search the faces of passengers disembarking from the early buses, and then Miguel would say, "Come on," and they would go home. Each day, Fiel seemed a little less anxious about leaving. Each day, the dog's body language relaxed a little more. On the third Saturday, Miguel drove Fiel back to Hospital San Lucas. Jose had arranged for them to meet in the garden again. Roberto's speech had improved slightly with therapy, and he was able to form more complete sentences, though they still came slowly. "He looks good," Roberto said, smiling as Fiel pressed against his legs. "Healthy." "He's eating well," Miguel said. "Gaining weight. Maria spoils him. She makes him special meals." Roberto nodded, his hand resting on Fiel's head. They sat in silence for a while, just being together. Then Roberto spoke again. "I don't know. When I leave here, if I leave." "You will," Miguel said with confidence he didn't entirely feel. "But not home, not apartment, too many stairs. Daughter found place, assisted living, no pets." Miguel understood what Roberto was trying to say, and his heart ached for the man. "Fiel can stay with us," he said, "for as long as necessary, forever if that's what it needs to be. And I'll bring him to visit wherever you are, whenever I can." "You are good man," Roberto said. Fiel knew. He knew who to trust. Over the following months, a pattern developed. Miguel and Fiel would visit Roberto twice a week. Roberto was eventually transferred to the assisted living facility his daughter had found, a place with a small courtyard where they could spend time together. Fiel no longer went to the bus stop each morning. Instead, he settled into life with Miguel and Maria, becoming part of their daily routine, their family. But Fiel never forgot Roberto. Every visit, the dog would transform back into the young, energetic animal he must have been before the stroke, before the waiting, before the long days of confusion. He would press close to Roberto's wheelchair, accepting scratches and praise and love. And Roberto, slowly recovering his speech and some limited mobility, would tell Miguel stories about their life together. About the day he found Fiel as a puppy, abandoned in a cardboard box outside the textile factory. About teaching Fiel to walk beside him without a leash. About the morning ritual of walking to the bus stop together, how it had become the most important part of Roberto's day. About how, after his wife died, Fiel had slept on her side of the bed for months, as if keeping it warm for her return. "He understands loss," Roberto said one afternoon, his speech much clearer now, 6 months after the stroke. "That's why he waited. He knew I would come back, if I could." "And you did," Miguel said, "in a way, through these visits." Roberto nodded. "Because of you, you gave us, both, another chance." On the 1-year anniversary of Roberto's stroke, Miguel organized something special. He spoke with Roberto's daughter, who agreed to visit from São Paulo. He coordinated with Jose and several other hospital staff who had followed Fiel's story. They gathered in the courtyard of the assisted living facility, about 15 people who had been touched by the story of a man and his faithful dog. Roberto was in his wheelchair, his speech now about 70% recovered, his right arm regaining some function. Fiel sat beside him, graying slightly around the muzzle now, content and healthy. Roberto's daughter was crying, seeing how happy her father was, understanding finally what the dog meant to him. Maria had brought a cake. Beatriz from the coffee kiosk had come. The elderly woman from Roberto's old building was there, and Jose had brought several nurses who had cared for Roberto during his hospital stay. "I want to make a toast," Roberto said, his voice still slow but clear. Everyone fell silent. To Miguel, who saw a dog waiting and understood it meant something, who took the time to care, to investigate, to help. He paused, gathering strength, and to Fiel, the best dog, who taught me that loyalty, love, these things don't end just because circumstances change, that waiting, hoping, these are not weaknesses, they are strengths. Everyone raised their glasses of juice and soda. Fiel, sensing the importance of the moment, let out a single bark. "And to second chances," Roberto added. "To new beginnings, that honor old promises." That evening, as Miguel drove home with Fiel in the passenger seat, Maria beside him in the back, he thought about all the mornings he'd almost ignored the dog, about how easy it would have been to just call animal control that first week, about how many small choices had led to this moment, this life where he had a dog he loved and a friend he visited, and a story that had changed him in ways he was still understanding. "You know," Maria said from the back seat, "we should get Fiel his own bed, a nice one, he's earned it." Miguel glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his wife smiling. "Yes," he agreed. "He has." Fiel looked at Miguel, then out the window at the city passing by, then back at Miguel. The dog's tail wagged once, twice. They were going home. And for the first time in his life, Fiel understood that home wasn't a place. It was the people who loved you, who saw you waiting, and who said, "I'll wait with you," or "I'll help you find what you're looking for," or "I'll give you something new to hope for." 3 years later, Roberto passed away in his sleep. It was peaceful, his daughter told Miguel over the phone. He had been smiling. The last word he'd spoken the night before was, "Fiel." Miguel took Fiel to the funeral. The dog sat quietly through the service, dignified and calm. Afterward, Roberto's daughter approached them. "My father left something for you," she said, handing Miguel an envelope. "He wrote it months ago, kept updating it as he got better at writing again." Miguel opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, in Roberto's careful, still slightly shaky handwriting. "Dear Miguel, if you are reading this, I have moved on from this world. I hope I got the chance to thank you properly before I left. But in case I didn't, let me do it now. You gave me a gift I didn't think I would receive. You gave me the chance to know that Fiel was safe, loved, cared for. You gave me visits and friendship. You gave both of us peace. Fiel is yours now, completely and forever. But I know he always was, from the moment he chose to trust you. Take care of him as you have been doing. Let him live the rest of his life knowing he is home. And thank you, Miguel. Thank you for seeing a dog waiting and deciding that this meant something. Thank you for being the kind of person who stops to care, who goes out of their way to help, who understands that small acts of kindness can change everything. You changed my life. You changed Fiel's life. And I hope somehow this story changed yours too. With gratitude and friendship, Roberto Silva. Miguel read the letter 3 times, standing in the cemetery with Maria's hand on his shoulder and Fiel pressing against his leg. Then he carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. "Let's go home," he said to Fiel. The dog looked up at him and Miguel could swear he saw understanding in those brown eyes. Not sadness, exactly, more like acceptance. The cycle was complete. The waiting was over. Roberto had been found, loved, remembered, and now it was time for life to continue. As they walked to the car, Miguel thought about the morning he'd first seen Fiel sitting outside the transit hub, waiting with such absolute certainty. He thought about the note on the collar, The trip to the hospital, the reunion in the garden. He thought about all the small moments that had followed. Teaching Phil to trust again, watching Roberto's slow recovery, building something new from something that had been broken. He thought about how many people passed by things that mattered every single day, too busy or too tired or too focused on their own lives to notice. And he thought about how lucky he was that one cold September morning, he had decided to notice. Now, if this story moved you, if it reminded you that there are still people in this world who stop to care, who see someone waiting and decide to help, who understand that loyalty and love are worth honoring even when it's inconvenient, even when it requires effort, even when the outcome is uncertain, then I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Because we tell stories like this one, stories about real human connection, about compassion in action, about the moments that restore your faith in people, stories that matter. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that believes kindness isn't just a nice idea, it's the most important thing we can practice. Thank you for listening to Roberto and Phil's story. And thank you for being the kind of person who stops to listen.